2 Kings chapter 2, verses 1 to 18. When the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven in a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal. Elijah said to Elisha, "Stay here, the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha said, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went to Bethel. The company of the prophets at Bethel came out to Elijah and asked, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," Elisha replied, "so be quiet." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, Elisha, the Lord has sent me to Jericho." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So they went to Jericho. The company of the prophets at Jericho went up to Elisha and asked him, "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" "Yes, I know," he replied, "so be quiet." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." And he replied, "As surely as the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." So the two of them walked on. 50 men from the company of the prophets went and stood at a distance, facing the place where Elijah and Elisha had stopped at the Jordan. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and to the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed over, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me, what can I do for you before I am taken from you?" "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. "You have asked a difficult thing," Elijah said. "Yet if you see me when I am taken from you, it will be yours. Otherwise, it will not." As they were walking along and talking together, suddenly a chariot of fire and horses of fire appeared and separated the two of them, and Elijah went up to heaven in a whirlwind. Elisha saw this and cried out, my father, the chariots and horsemen of Israel!" And Elisha saw him no more. Then he took hold of his garment and tore it in two. Elisha then picked up Elijah's cloak that had fallen from him and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan. He took the cloak that had fallen from Elijah, and struck the water with it. "Where now is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" he asked. When he struck the water, it divided to the right and to the left, and he crossed over. The company of the prophets from Jericho who were watching said, "The spirit of Elijah is resting on Elisha." And they went to meet him and bowed to the ground before him. "Look," they said, "we, your servants, have 50 able men. Let them go and look for your master. Perhaps the Spirit of God has picked them up and set him down on some mountain or in some valley." "No," Elisha replied, "do not send them." But they persisted until he was too embarrassed to refuse. So he said, "Send them." And they sent 50 men who searched for 3 days but did not find him. When they returned to Elisha, who was staying in Jericho, he said to them, "Didn't I tell you not to go?"
Quite a last day, wouldn't you say? I wonder what our last day will be like that we spend here on this earth. 2 words, I think, describe Elisha: tenacity and audacity. And he had both of those qualities, had tons of them. He witnessed God's work in Elijah's life every day, performing miracles that could only come from God. And also, as Elijah spoke truth in a world of lies. 2 Kings that Soren just read to us tell us that Elijah was taken up to heaven. Elisha and even the sons of the prophets knew what was going to happen that day. And Elisha had the audacity to ask for a double portion of Elijah's spirit, verse 9. Elisha wanted to be recognized as Elijah's heir, and God said yes to that bold request. We too have been left witnesses by faithful Christians, by the death of faithful Christians, who in a sense act as our Elijahs, who act as our examples. The sermon today is entitled, "The Journey of Life." I'm going to talk about 3 different things: the daily influences, the fact that this journey passes by swiftly, and also this journey has a great impact on many lives. So let's talk first about the journey and the daily influences. And to do that, I want to mention that there are 3 gods in this age in which we live. And I use the word gods with a small g. The gods that I speak of, the first one is hedonism. And that is a worldly attitude, the belief that pleasure or happiness is the highest good. There's an old adage, and for those of you who are younger, because that word shows my age, adage means it's a saying. There's an old saying that says, "Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die." That's particularly noticeable, at least to me, when I see the beer commercials on TV. And they're all about people who are partying and having a good time. They're all beautiful people. None of them have beer bellies, but they're all drinking. What is left out of this fact of the eat, drink, and be merry is the fact that when we die, as Paul says, we all stand before the judgment seat of God, Romans 14 and verse 10. And that we stand there to receive the things done in the body, whether they be good or bad, 2 Corinthians 5 and verse 10. The second god of this age is narcissism. And that is where self is king. It comes from Greek mythology, a beautiful youth who looked into a spring of water and he fell in love with his own reflection, and then he pined away. The TV ads of today are all about self. Buy this and it'll make you happy. I noticed this particularly on several of the car advertisements and the truck advertisements. If you only buy this particular car or this particular truck, you'll be happy, and not only that, it'll be better than anybody else's. One of them, I think, says something like jealous, jealous, jealous all through the ad. Well, there's not only that. There's billboard signs. Over where I live in Transcona, there was a billboard sign at this particular business: "Come in and have a pedicure. You deserve it." Now, I might tell you that I have never had a manicure nor a pedicure in my life. So maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is that this ad says, you're worth it. And those ads, that attitude is with us throughout this society we live in, narcissism. The other day I read in one of my daily devotionals about mountain climbers who were climbing Mount Everest. One of the climbers had collapsed due to the lack of oxygen at such heights. 40 climbers passed this individual by, and coming down, not one of them stopped to help this individual out. The reason being, they were concentrated on themselves and getting to the top. What's wrong with our society? Well, I'd submit to you that one of the things that is wrong in this society is narcissism, putting self above others. Maybe we need to think about the golden rule just a little bit more, Matthew 7 and verse 12, that we would do unto others as we would have them do unto us. In other words, the way we treat those around us, let's make sure that we treat them the way we ourselves would want to be treated, and not to let narcissism be the god that is prevalent in our life. The third god in this society is consumerism, materialism, the greed for things. Again, watch the commercials, listen to the advertisements. Unfortunately, we as a society have forgotten to be thankful. I read the other day a verse that jumped out to me from the wisdom literature of the Old Testament, Psalm 9. And David says, "I will give thanks to the Lord with all my heart. I will tell of all thy wonders. I will be glad and exult in thee. I will sing praise to thy name, O Most High." We did that this morning. The singing from up here is just beautiful as your combined voices lift those notes of praise to our God as we give thanks for the blessings of life. But let's not just do it here when we sing our praise to God. Let's try to remember to do that every day that we are given, because our society, for the most part, is a very unthankful society. People seem to have forgotten how to say thank you for the little things. Let's remember individually to be a thankful person. So those are the influences, the daily influences that each one of us live with and in. Secondly, the journey passes swiftly. It goes by very quickly for each one of us. In Psalm 90 and verse 10, it says, "As for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone, and we fly away." Verse 12 says, because this is so true, verse 12 says, "So teach us, God, teach us to number our days, that we may present to Thee a heart of wisdom." James 4 and verse 14 says that our lives are just like a vapor that appear for a little time and then vanish away. That's so true. And yet there are people who never think of death, particularly of their own death. Several years ago, an individual I knew had a brain aneurysm. This was on a Friday morning as his daughter walked up the sidewalk to his home. He was going to make her pancakes that morning. He had a brain aneurysm. He was rushed to the hospital. They called his wife. By the time she got there, he couldn't even speak. By Sunday night, they disconnected the life support systems. Now, he and his wife had been married for several years, a relative of mine, actually. They'd raised a family. But never once in their married life had they talked about what would happen if one or the other of them died. And so the one that was left was so stricken by grief that functioning daily was almost impossible for a very long time. I'm a numbers guy. Finance and budgets have been part of my life for many years. So I did some statistics as I was thinking about this fact, to number our days, not our years, but number our days. I did a little bit of study, and I looked at the ages of 49 people who'd passed away. The total years for those 49 people were surprising, at least to me, a total of 3,718 years, almost 4 centuries, that these 49 people had lived. The average age at death for all of these people was 75.9 years. The oldest was 97, the youngest was 24. Less than 2%, 1.84% to be exact, made it over 90. You know what that tells me? It tells me that I probably won't get over 90 years of age. I'm probably going to be gone before that. Then I look at my age now and I think, whew, there's not much time left here. Number our days. I liked Wes's prayer. Thank you, God, for today. And thank you for the days that you give us, because that's all we can count. The days that we are given. But let me give you an encouragement. I know that's those statistics can be kind of concerning, right? Let me give you some encouragement to those of you who are Christians, who I'll say is everybody who is here today. King David in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12, was told, when your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers. And over again, that statement is found in the Bible, the days that you are given. When your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers. The psalmist says that God appoints the day of our death, numbers our days before there is even one of them. But how good is that? As David was told, when your days are complete and you lie down with your fathers, you have the hope of seeing those who you've loved who've passed on before. Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 39 in the Old Testament law of Moses said, God speaking to Moses, it is I who put to death and give life. Now, I have a little bit of concern with this assisted death legislation that is in our government at this time. It is not up to us, to human beings, to decide when we die. That is God's prerogative, alone, period. Mark that down. It is not up to us to decide when we leave this earth. Yesterday, in the Free Press, in an article entitled Medically Assisted Suicide, Canadians expect a process that allows Canadians who are seeking death with dignity to get the kind of medical help they need. At the same time, Canadians expect government to protect our most vulnerable. Now, I'm not a prophet nor the son of a prophet, but let me say this. If this legislation passes and becomes law where people can have a poison cocktail made that will fry them inside and end their physical life because they don't want to live anymore, I don't think that the vulnerable will be too long behind. When children who are narcissistic, who get sick of looking after their old parents, who don't look like they'll recover, I don't think that would be long in following. And so this legislation is very, very serious, and we need to pray about it. Be careful of what you ask for, because you just might get it. What if I'm in pain and in suffering? What if I no longer want to live? Listen to God. It is I, God, who put to death and give life. So let's talk about the importance, the sacredness of human life for a moment. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, when God was making this world and making mankind, it says, "Then the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living being." The Hebrew language in which the Old Testament was written for that word being is the word soul. When God breathes into us the breath of life, we become a living soul. And so we are made of body, soul, and spirit. I know that society puts much emphasis on our physical appearance. But I have been told that there are no two snowflakes that are identical. So how much more when it comes to human beings, that we are all different. You've heard the word identical twins. There's no such thing as identical twins. They may look the same and very often act the same, but they are not completely identical because they're individuals and there's always differences, even in what we term identical twins. Every one of us is different. We are special orders. You could say that we are specially made because when we are formed in our mother's womb, the mold is broken, never to be used again. So if you are struggling with self-image, and quite often that's a thing with younger people, but I guess probably there's no age for that sort of problem if you have the difficulty with self-image. If you are struggling with self-image, take a look in the mirror today and say that I am specially made. I'm a special order. and God has a purpose for my life. Thirdly, the journey and its impact. What do you want to leave behind you? You cannot take anything with you, but you can leave something behind you. You know, the other day we've been looking at a book by John Ortberg, Soul Keeping. Some of us were in the Sunday morning class on this, but we've been doing it midweek. And there was a couple of things that jumped out at me as I thought about this thought. What do you want to leave behind you? Let me read from John Ortberg's book. A few years ago, I was asked to speak at the church of a pastor in the Deep South whose success had made him famous. Pictures of him with famous people and framed covers of his best-selling books lined his office walls. But now he was beyond the age when most people retired. His church was shrinking. His influence was waning, and he was miserable. When I met this pastor, he began to tell me how wrong his critics were, even though I hardly knew him or his critics. He chastised his people for not bringing enough visitors to fill the empty seats. I'm tired of looking at empty seats, he said, as if the goal of church is empty seat avoidance. He had climbed to remarkable heights in church ministry, but his mind was preoccupied by bitter thoughts. His face attempted smiles that were disconnected from his feelings, and his will strained to maintain a facade that had been hollowed out years before. His soul was disintegrating. I thought of another man, a businessman, who devoted his life to making money. His children always knew that they had less priority than his job. He never said so, of course. But our deepest devotions simply leak out of our bodies by how we spend our time and what makes us smile and what claims our energy. The man built a corporate empire, but his employees all felt used. He and his wife bought a magnificent home overlooking the ocean in Southern California. He had a stroke, yet no one came to visit him. He sits in a wheelchair now, breathing from an oxygen tank, alone in a mansion cage. He still obsesses over what he owns and remains incapable of gratitude or generosity. This is a ruined soul. I hope that none of us ever come to our last day and are described by either one of these individuals. I suggest that we all make a personal goal that as we grow to be old people, and by the way, I'm not there yet, but as we grow to be old people, be the kind of person that little children like, that little children enjoy to be around. And if that's the kind of older person you are, I guarantee that everybody else is going to like you as well and love you. Let me talk about some good examples. There's the wrong examples of these two individuals. But let me tell you about a couple by the name of Bob and Yvonne Potter. In 1956, these people gave their lives to Christ. And they started a Saturday night Bible study in their home for high school students and college students. And this was a serious Bible study, memorization of Scripture and preparation of lessons. When Bob passed away several years later, his funeral service was a celebration, filled with many people who were still walking the road of faith, all because a young couple had opened their home and their hearts to help others find the Lord. Yes, this journey of life that we are each on can be difficult due to the influences of the world that we live in, the narcissism, the hedonism, the consumerism, and sometimes where we get sucked into those things ourselves. Or maybe due to our health and its failing, or being told we have that dreaded C word, or our heart is about to give out. Or maybe it's our relationships that are failing or have failed. Life can be difficult. And for sure, This journey of life passes us by, each one, very swiftly. I think sometimes we maybe think of our physical age and we wondered, how in the world did the time pass this quickly to get me here? But you know, the journey of this life and its impact on others is exceedingly important. Elijah was taken up to heaven in dramatic fashion in a chariot of fire drawn by horses of fire. And when I read that the other day, I said to my wife, Stacy, well, we won't go quite like that. And she said, how do you know? And you know, it kind of made me think, after we step across that, through that veil that separates this life from the next, I think every one of us who are faithful Christians are going to be amazed at what happens to us at that point in life. When my brother was dying, he was looking up and he saw something beautiful. And he said to his daughter, take my hand and come with me. And she said, I can't, Dad, but you go. When it comes to our own death, when we leave this world, someone has said, some men see only a hopeless end, but the Christian rejoices in an endless hope. That endless hope, the journey of life, is what I proclaim to you today, and may we be faithful until death, that we might receive the crown of life.